In my first High Republic video, I made a point that, in the end, the Jedi's struggles were futile. That in the future, the Empire would rise and the Order would all but go extinct. The final adult novel, Trials of the Jedi, had to find a way to satisfyingly conclude this expansive story, while at the same time leading to a future that we know will be tragic. I think it does so brilliantly, especially through the metaphysical explorations of the Force through the nameless planet, Planet X, or as we come to know it, Sophos. Now this is going to be a relatively short video. While I would love to do a truly deep dive into every aspect of this initiative, I don't really want to limit myself to just Star Wars. So all I'll be talking about is the planet, the Sri Karai, the Blight, and what it specifically means for our two protagonists, Ava Chris and Elzar Man. Because I feel like the imagery that Charles Soule utilizes in this book can give off the wrong impression. With that being said, spoilers for the entire High Republic initiative, and specifically Trials of the Jedi. I would have it here, my copy has not arrived yet. So when I say give off the wrong impression, I'm talking of course about the idea of the light side and the dark side being equal. Now, this is a visual confusion that I believe the Mortis arc from the Clone Wars also falls into in very similar ways. We know for a fact that this is not what Charles Soule intended. There's so much talk of light and life, and even in the final chapter of the novel. And in a recent interview with YouTube channel Star Wars Explained, he said outright that Grey Jedi don't exist.
And the events of the story into this kind of moral gray zone, not to say that he's a Grey Jedi because those don't exist, but like a gray area.
That's my goat right there. The visual light and dark exist in a balance on Sophos to maintain the blight that lies at the center of the planet. When the Sri Karai, who consumed the Force around them, were forcibly removed from the planet, the blight was able to spread. Now, the Force is light. So what exactly is this dark? The dark that Ava and Elzar need to keep in balance? Well, I think this darkness is part of the Force, but it's entirely separate from what we know as the dark side. This darkness is death and decay, but these are natural aspects of life that we need to accept. It wasn't evil of life for Padme to eventually die. The evil was in Anakin's response to it. The dark side is a desire to corrupt the Force. It is entirely unnatural and exists only in sentient beings. It requires spite. It requires pride. It requires ego. Not all animals have ego, but sentients do. To me, nothing better illustrates the idea that the dark side is artificial than there being a real dark, death and decay, from which the dark side is derived from. This natural dark is perceived by the dark side to be an attack on the ego, or whatever you take with you. This is why the blight is in the dark interior of the planet. It thrives on it in the same way that the artificial spite and hatred thrives in natural loss. The blight, the disease that spreads throughout the galaxy as part of Marchion Ro's plan, consumes both living and non-living. It's the end of all things. It's not decay, it's entropy, it's apathy, it's nihilism. And apathy is death. Not the death of the body, but the death of the soul, death of the Force itself. It's why the blight appears spontaneously, randomly, on any number of planets, no matter where they are, because the blight is entropy, and entropy is entirely random. It's chaotic, it's devoid of meaning. So what is Sophos? Well, the planet's name is derived from the ancient Greek word sophrosine, an idea of soundness of mind, of temperance, of purity, of self-control. Ava and Elzar have been confronted with their darkness on multiple occasions, and they have overcome it. But despite Ava hearing the Force as a song throughout the entirety of the High Republic story, it's not until she and Elzar are within the planet, in its dark interior, does she open herself up to the entirety of the song. She hears the darkness, she hears the suffering and struggles of her friends. Struggle and suffering are natural parts of life, even if we believe them to be negative. but it's when we let them take hold of us that they become the dark side. That's why she can hear them now, because they were always natural, even if she didn't want to hear them. Avar Kriss is the light of the Jedi. She is a beacon of hope, and in being hope, one must confront that which they fear, that which they fight against. The High Republic was a golden age of prosperity, but were the Jedi better back then, or were they just coddled? The great disaster that began this story was a wake-up call, one that reminded the Jedi of how painful life is, of how much suffering there can be. They must confront that suffering and not let it consume them. And for Avar and Elzar in this final moment, it doesn't. Sophrazine is purity, the light, it's self-control, it's holding back the inner dark side in the face of the natural outward darkness. The blight is at the center of the planet, because that ego is an innate part of our sentience. Pride is our core, and we must keep it in balance and not let it consume us. We must turn to the light. The Echo Stones that power the rods that control the Nameless and the Blight are merely conduits of the Force. They bolster your inner darkness or your light. You can still combat nihilism with evil. Evil is not apathy, it's desire. You are giving yourself meaning, but it doesn't make it a good thing. Marchion is likened to the Blight, deeply woven with it. He leads the Nihil, he leads nihilism, and his ultimate plan is omnicide of the entire galaxy, but it's out of rage, of spite. The Blight is also called the Grey.
Not to say that he's a Grey Jedi, because those don't exist.
Apathy is death. But Marchion is dark. The Nihil weren't his creation. They stemmed from the path of the Closed Fist, a radical splinter faction of the path of the Open Hand. The Open Hand were a Force cult that believed both the Sith and the Jedi to be manipulating the Force, rejecting Force users entirely. However, the Jedi don't use the Force. They don't bend it like the Sith. They are conduits of it. They let its will flow through them. What the Open Hand strive for is quite literally apathy. The Jedi choose to act. They choose to acknowledge that everything around them is bound by the Force. The Open Hand speak of the Force as a gift given freely until you choose to do something with it. I am, of course, ignoring the fact that their leader was secretly a spiteful manipulative Force user, but that leads to the Closed Fist, who take a more radical approach to spreading their apathy, their desire for the Force users to stop choosing, because those choices could be evil. The Closed Fist are akin to the Blight, the Grey, but they're still choosing. This isn't apathy. Marda Ro chose, and so did Marchion. Sentience can't be apathetic. So what is the Blight? I think it's formed from people. I think it's the universe's reaction to sentient beings. Of course, that's not a substantiated take, but I kind of like that. It reinstates Star Wars metaphysics as myth rather than lore. Also, we never find out Marchion's real name, and I like that we don't know it. No one will, because when he is sentenced to life in isolated imprisonment, it is the greatest punishment that he could possibly be given. No one will remember him, and it terrifies him. He wasn't a true nihilist. No sentient being can truly separate themselves from their ego, and neither can Avar and Elzar. They must confront it, not deny its existence, and keep it at bay. They don't deny their desire for each other, but they don't let that attachment consume them like it would eventually do to Anakin. Their story ends with Charles Soule visualizing them as yin and yang because they embody the light and the dark. But he still says that they serve the light, because lowercase light and lowercase dark are joy and suffering, love and loss. And they are natural parts of life. Capital D dark, the dark side, is when you can't accept that. But capital L light, that's when you can truly let go of ego. When you can acknowledge all aspects of life, even futility, and still choose to not hurt yourself or those around you. The Force is everything. A single life connected to all life. All things connected to all other things. This is what the Jedi believe, and this is why they fight. for life and the light.